In this video, we're going to go through a complete tutorial on setting up a project in mindzie Studio from start to finish. For this particular example, we're going to use a banking customer project. So the first thing we're going to do is log into mindzie Studio. Once we're in, we are going to click on the Projects button along the top and then click Add New Project. And in this particular example, you're going to see that we have the project gallery available. We can upload an existing package, but we're going to create an empty project. And for this particular project, we are going to focus on a new customer onboarding project. So I'm just going to give my project a name and hit create, and it's going to take me into the project. Now, if this project is being delivered to a customer, you may also want to click back on the projects and update that project by clicking the three little dots up in the right-hand corner. And we're just going to upload a thumbnail to give this project a nice particular image for the customer to reference. So we'll upload a new thumbnail to that project, uploading the project with the thumbnail that I've selected. What I'm also going to do here is click those three dots one more time, and I'm also going to assign users to this project. So we're going to select a couple of existing mindzie users that we have here, and for this example, we will also update their permissions from contributor, where they can just add to the project, to full owners, where they can do everything in the project. So we'll add that, and we now have our customer onboarding project framework ready to go. So it's set up with the project here that we can now see. It's got our users, and it now has our thumbnail. So we will now click in, and the first screen we're taken to is the upload data. Now, depending on obviously a real world scenario, you may be pushing data into mindzie based on connecting to existing systems using the mindzie data designer. But for this particular example, we're just going to upload a CSV. So we'll choose the upload CSV option, and we're going to find our data set, and we're going to use this banking onboarding data set and select it and load it into mindzie Studio. So it will upload into mindzie Studio. It will then give us the option just to validate and have a quick look, set any encoding or anything else that's relevant to that data set. And then once that is set up, it's going to analyze the data itself just to make sure it's prepared and ready, prepare it for importing into mindzie Studio. And once that is complete and ready, we will have the option to assign key columns in the window here. So right from here, I can edit the dataset name if I so choose and want to make some changes. And I can simply drag and drop all of the relevant key column information. So you can see it's automatically detected case ID, activity, and timestamp. We're going to assign the resource as well to this resource name with a simple drag and drop. Right from with here, you can change column types, data types. We can anonymize data if necessary, and all kinds of other things just to add enhanced data security and make sure that the information that we're pushing into mindzie Studio is exactly as we wish. So we're just going to click next, and it's going to upload and import that data set into mindzie Studio, converting all the data, updating, transforming it, and doing all of the necessary actions. And you'll now see here that it is uploaded our data set and gives us just a little bit of information. We can see that it has 10,000 cases, roughly 121,000 events in that data set. Once we hit save, by default, mindzie will do a couple of things. It will automatically build a data pipeline, which we'll learn a little bit more about here in a few minutes. And as well, it will automatically add a handful of really key, interesting analysis by default. So just to give anyone who starts within mindzie Studio sort of a leg up, that gives us things like the process overview. We can see long case duration, durations between main process steps, and all kinds of other insightful information that just gets populated by default, with the idea being that any new user now gets a quick start into analyzing their process. So now as we begin our build out of this particular example, what we're going to do is we're going to set up some structure around how we want mindzie Studio to look for our users. Now, there is no specific way that mindzie has to be configured. It really depends on the usage, who the customers are, how you're deploying it, and really what information you want to present to different users in different situations. But generally, there's a good framework that you can follow that just helps with some good prudence around mindzie itself. So what we're going to do is we're going to start at basically the front end, build out some framework, and then work our way back into full-on analysis and publishing up metrics. So first, we're going to decide how we want our system set up. So in this example, I'm going to click on the dashboards up at the top. We're going to add a new dashboard, and we are just going to call it the mindzie Studio Setup for Onboarding and Banking. We are going to turn off the Copilot because this is informational only, and it's going to set up a blank dashboard for us. In this particular dashboard, since it's informational only, what we're going to do is just add a note, and in this case, I'm going to use some advanced features. So I'm going to disable the title, and I'm just going to add into this note the overall details of what we're doing here. So we're going to cut and paste some text that I've already created, and I'm going to use Markdown language, which is embedded in the note panel, just to format this a little bit. So we're going to use a hashtag to make that a header. We're going to disable the title. We can change some colors, and we're just going to create that. And what I'm going to do here now on this particular layout is I'm going to click Edit Layout up in the top left, and I'm just going to stretch that note out just to be full screen and click Finish. So the notes are a handy way just to give your users or even yourself an overview of everything that is in this setup. What is it about? What key metrics? What key dashboards? What's in the data set? So I just get a full informational panel when I come into this setup. Now I'm going to set up a few more structural dashboards just so I have them as we start creating our metric. So first thing I'm going to do is add another dashboard, and we're going to call this the process overview dashboard. With some information, I'm going to make my Copilot collapse for this example, and I'm going to hit save. Right, and this is more of our executive summary, who's getting it, what they're getting. We're going to add another dashboard in here, and we're going to call it our operations dashboard. So this is designed more for the team. So an onboarding manager, a branch manager, that sort of thing would consume this type of information. And we'll save that dashboard. We probably want one in here, of course, like any good process for our compliance team. So we'll add in a compliance and risk dashboard. And you'll see I'm setting all the copilots just to collapse for now for simplicity's sake. We're going to take another one here, and we're going to add in our branch manager. So these would be more user level insights. And you can see as I go through and do this, I am not adding any details yet. We're simply just setting up the framework within mindzie Studio. And last but certainly not least, we'll set up a dashboard for our process improvement team, just like this. And I'm going to set that to collapsed as well. And now effectively we have a dashboard structure for the entire business. So about the process, an operations dashboard, a compliance dashboard, a branch management dashboard, and then one generally for our process improvement team. So this gives us our dashboard structure that we want to set up. Now within each one of these dashboards, obviously we want to populate them with KPIs, metrics, and insights. So what we'll do for that is we are going to click into our investigations, which is our folder structure within mindzie Studio. And you can see since I uploaded the data set, I already have one investigation in here that was added by default. Later on, we're probably going to delete this just to align everything to our current structure. But for now, what we're going to do is simply start setting up our investigation structure. So the first thing we want to do is set up the necessary insights and analysis to populate our process overview dashboard. So everything aligns and is simple for my user. I'm going to give this investigation folder a name that corresponds directly to that dashboard for simplicity's sake. And when I'm creating analysis, if I have more than one data set, I can select it here. So I'm just going to click on the data sets and use our default data set. And we are going to create that investigation. And again, think of an investigation as a folder. And within that investigation, we now can create multiple different types of analysis. What's the information that we want to be able to look at as we set up our structure? So you can see here we have a laundry list of templates. That's just a little bit of shortcut for you. If you want to go ahead and use those, you can as well. but you can also create these things from scratch. So I can create a blank notebook if I want, a process map notebook, and a variant DNA analysis, all with a click of a button. In this particular scenario, we're going to start populating our dashboard with all of the various metrics that we need. So the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to create a new analysis, and we're going to call it the insight that we're looking for. So we're looking for the average onboarding duration. And it will now create that analysis and give me all of this information contained within the analysis. So the ability to use Mindzie's low-code, no-code notebooks to create the metrics I want. We can populate them out to a local dashboard on this particular analysis, and we'll show you that in a second. We can also view the process map, the variant DNA, data overview, and case explorer, as well as leverage Mindzie's AI Copilot, all contained within that particular notebook. So we'll start building out that notebook here in a second, but before we do, we're going to jump to another stage within Mindzie, which is called our log enrichment. So within the log enrichment now, this is where we can clean, classify, and enhance data that has been pushed into Mindzie Studio. So think of the first stage as you would generally connect to any type of data source, a database, data warehouse, or raw system using Mindzie's Data Designer, and import that data and transform it into the Mindzie Studio. Mindzie also supports, as an FYI, third-party ETL tools as well, if you want to push data directly into it using Mindzie's API. Once it's in Mindzie Studio, you now have clean, classified, and structured process intelligence data. The next stage that it goes through in Mindzie is this enrichment stage. And this actually enhances the data with new attributes, with performance metrics, with all kinds of insightful information. So before we talk about it, I'm just going to, for example, click on the data sets, and you're going to see now that you actually have two data sets. So we have our original data set, which is the raw original event log that we've loaded into Mindzie Studio. And then Mindzie automatically creates what's called an enriched data set. This is the post-Mindzie pipeline data set. This is the data set that you use for all of your analysis and investigations and KPIs. Think of it as the enhanced data set by the Mindzie pipeline. So we're going to flip back over to our log enrichment here. And in the log enrichment, just like all of the structure you'll see with Mindzie Studio, you're going to see these notebooks along the side, and then the ability to add blocks to calculate and add enrichments. So what we're going to start off with here is we're going to leverage Mindzie's performance wizard. The performance wizard automatically looks at key process pairs, calculates duration between all these process pairs, including the full case itself, and starts to bucket them into fast, normal, and slow durations. You can set your duration time, but really what it's saying is what's good, what's bad, and what's really concerning. And you can do this for any combination of activity pairs. So if one isn't automatically calculated, you can add new activity pairs as needed. If you want to see from one step to another, maybe you want to see the duration cycle between an entire department, I might want to go in and add that and say I'm going to add an activity pair from when it reprocesses to conducting a risk assessment, whatever it might be. This is also where if a customer has its own internal SLAs, these can be applied into these buckets for simple analysis. You can apply their internal SLAs simply by updating these metrics as necessary. When I hit create, what that's automatically going to do is create a new book along the left-hand side, and within that book, it's going to populate it with a number of different blocks that will calculate all of those different performance pairs and even categorize them. Now, in order to add that to the log, we simply have to do what's called calculating the enrichment. This executes a data pipeline and again takes that initial data set and now creates an enriched data set with all of this new information. So this could take a couple of seconds depending on how big your data set is. And once it's done, your data set will refresh and reload. And what we'll be able to do now is look at all of the new attributes that have been created. So if you look underneath this overview area, you're going to see a whole list of attributes. These are ones that came from the log that we used and loaded into mindzie Studio. So the different activity names, for instance, when I click on them, they're displayed on the right-hand side. So I can see all of the different activity names that are, or case steps that are in this particular log. You'll see account type, cost, channel, all these things. Once we get to these ones with icons, we can start to see the ones that mindzie Studio is automatically enhancing your data with. So time of day, case start, case finish, case cost time, first resource, long duration. And since we added the performance calculations, you'll see it's added all of these new enrichments down the bottom here that calculate the different performance metrics between all of the steps that we set up in our performance wizard. So as we go through and add the various insights through the log enrichment engine, they get added to our data set to enhance the value of the data and enhance the value of the KPIs and metrics that we can create within mindzie Studio. So for this particular example, let's look at conformance next. And I'm going to use this pre-created conformance book here. And I'm going to click Add New, and it's going to give me a library of different enrichments that I can add into my system. So let's start off with a typical conformance. mindzie Studio uses what's called rule-based conformance to allow you to find what's good, what should happen, what shouldn't happen, if things should happen out of order, and flag them as different severity levels. So we're going to start by choosing the undesired activity, and we're going to scroll here and we're going to see that exception handling. We really don't want exception handling in most cases, or reprocessing. So you simply choose what activity is undesired, things that you don't want to see happening within your process based on the activities that have been imported. And then what we're going to do is just take this, and we'll use this for our title, and we're going to set a severity in here. In this case, we're going to put it as medium just for this example. You can see it happens quite frequently in our cases, but still something that we really don't want to have happen. You can define as many of these as necessary. When I hit create, you'll see I now have a new block for handle exceptions as a conformance rule. Other good things to handle in here, if I click on the conformance tab, mandatory activities, so are things missing, undesired activities, as you saw already, repeated activities or loops and rework, even wrong activity order. Maybe things shouldn't happen without an approval step. We can define all of these in the log enrichment. Once I've defined and set them all up, and I can have as many different ones as I want, all I have to do is then calculate my enrichments, and they will be added into the log here. And you can see my log is now being updated with my new set of information. And we'll go ahead and use this now. Now, a couple other handy features within mindzie Studio as well that you can take advantage of if you have other setups, other projects, other tenants, other configurations that you've already done within the mindzie Studio. There is the ability to cut and paste between different projects. So I can have multiple tabs going. I can have one project open on one side, one project open on another, and I can create all kinds of different information and attributes as necessary. So if there's certain things that I want to cascade commonly throughout my projects, I can sort of have a shortcut of using the cut and paste option. So in this case, I have two tabs open, one that you can't see, and I'm just going to copy a notebook from my other tab from a previous enrichment, and I'm going to simply click the three dots. Wherever you see three dots in mindzie Studio, it's a menu that gives you options, and I'm just going to paste that project or that new enrichment in. So now it allows me to move enrichments pretty quickly between different scenarios as needed. So if I have, as I mentioned, common ones, whether they're AI predictions, whether they might be performance things, whether they might be using Mindzie's performance monitor enhancements, any common calculations that you want to be able to apply across different projects, you can use them. Of course, they have to apply to your data set is very important as well. If they don't apply to your data set, then you can't really use them. So we're going to calculate the enrichments one last time because I added a new block into here. And once that pipeline is executed, now we're going to go ahead and start creating our different analysis that we want to work with. So now that I have my enrichments calculated, I want to go back to my analysis and start setting up all of these analysis investigations and everything else. So I'm going to take a little shortcut here and I'm going to click the current button that's now appeared. And what this does is simply just takes me back to the last analysis that I was working on. So when I come into this analysis, we can see we want to look at average onboarding time. Now within the Mindzie Studio, the core structure of how everything works is we have data that comes from source system that gets pushed into Mindzie Studio either as a log or through the Mindzie Data Designer that gives us the foundational original data set. From there, that runs through the Mindzie Log Enrichment Engine where we can enhance it with performance, conformance, AI predictions, and all kinds of other enhancements to make our insights that we can generate out of it even more powerful. And now we can start to use the foundational blocks, which are all built around this idea of analysis, what we call filters and calculators. Analysis are similar to Jupyter notebooks. There's things that we want to dig into. They're metrics we want to discover or create. They're basically our workbook or worksheet that we're working on. Within that worksheet, I can use filters by clicking the Add Filter button and select from Mindzie's laundry list of different pre-built no-code, low-code filters in order to isolate what data I'm going to look for. So if I want to look for certain divisions, departments, if I want to separate my average duration in this case, and I want to look for one for the US versus Europe, I may want to add different types of filter for that data. In this case, we're going to start with the other block that's commonly used, which is known as a calculator. And this is a visualization. So one is what data do I want to work with or filter on? And the calculator is what do I want to do with that data? And there's a whole laundry list of different calculators in here that you can select from in order to build out your analysis. Keep in mind that you can combine any of these blocks. So you can put the blocks together. I can combine multiple filters and multiple calculators to get all kinds of interesting outputs that I might want to look into. So in order to start with this one, we are going to search for average. So I want to look for average duration. So I'm going to select average and I'm going to look at my attribute and I'm going to look for duration. So this calculator is pre-designed, as you can see, to give me an average value, and then I just got to choose what attribute I want to do that average value on. Because we've run our data through the Mindzie Log Enrichment Engine, I now have an attribute that is specifically calculating the case duration. So when I add that, you can now see that it's added a new block here that shows me the average duration for these particular cases. As you get more and more into Mindzie Studio, you may want to leverage filters to look at it for certain years. You can look at trend calculations. But now for our first metric that we want to put onto a dashboard, I'm able now to add that block to an analysis and I have it represented here. So now what do I want to do with this information is the next question. So first, in my scenario, I'm going to publish it out into our dashboard. So the first level is what we call a local dashboard, which we'll call our average duration here. So I'll give it a title, and it's going to take it within the context of my notebook, and it's going to put it on the notebook dashboard. So it keeps it local so I can summarize everything that I've created in one simple dashboard, all contained within the notebook. But in this scenario, our ultimate end goal is obviously to have a fully configured dashboard for our end user, which is what we call global dashboards. So I'm now going to hover over this metric, and again, the 3 dots represent a menu, and I'm going to add it to dashboard. And this particular one is based on our process overview dashboard. So I'm going to click there and add it to that dashboard. So I'm now taking that panel, that metric, that KPI that I've created, I'm publishing out to our global dashboard, and now it will be a metric that our users can use and consume. The other thing to remember about all of this data is mindzie Studio is not only designed as a discovery tool to figure out how processes work, where the bottlenecks and efficiencies are, and where we can optimize and improve, but it also specializes in being able to monitor these for continuous improvement. So once we set up all this structure, if the data is being refreshed, either at a constant schedule because we've connected to a system, or if we even come in and simply update the log manually with a new CSV file or a new export, all of these metrics will automatically recalculate. So our users can monitor these things in real time, look at trends and everything else that might be valuable to them. So with a few clicks of a button now, we've quickly created a notebook to look at our average onboarding duration. We've added that duration notebook or that metric directly to the local notebook and published it out to a global dashboard for the user as well. One of the interesting features of mindzie Studio as well, when we start to think of global dashboards driven by these notebooks, is each metric we put on a global dashboard has the ability to drill in, meaning that you can click on it to dive in and get further information. What it does is it pulls up this analysis notebook that's driving that metric or KPI. So some helpful things we can do is by using the pin, we can actually choose what tab by default the user will land on when they drill in. Do we want them to see all the cases? Do we want them to see a data overview, a process map, a variant DNA? In this case, I want them to see this local dashboard view or analyst dashboard view. So I'm going to click on the pin to select this and set this as what will be displayed whenever someone drills in. Now, as you start building out mindzie Studio, there are all kinds of insightful information. Depending on the user role, responsibility, deployment, there can be a couple of analysts, there can be hundreds or thousands of users that are all consuming this information. So the more structure that you build into it, the better. So on these things, we can also add a note to explain what this is. And in this case, this shows you the average duration of each case. So we can add tips, tricks, notes, all kinds of other things that will be value add for the user that ends up consuming all this information at the end of this. Also helpful if you're a process analyst and you are building out lots and lots of different analysis, investigations, and KPIs and metrics. You can use this note feature right on the dashboard window to say what you've done. There is also on the notebook view the ability for you to add a note calculator. Just to simply say, what is this? I want to say this, that, the next, whatever it is. What am I doing here? I can add that right in. So as I start building things, I can add those in. You can also add in descriptions. This does the average duration. So you can have titles and descriptions so you understand what this is doing and why it's doing it. So as you build out your full structure now, you are able to come back and reference what was done originally. So next case, I want to go through and I want to add another analysis and put another metric on this. And I want to look at the average cost per onboarding. So what is the average cost for a particular case? A very common metric. Now there are a couple of ways to think about this. Your data set might contain the average cost. Super helpful. If that information is in the data set already, you can use it. It will be another attribute. You can calculate it, and do all kinds of sums and everything else that you might need. But the other thing that you may have is you may want to calculate it using mindzie Studio if it's not available in the data set. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to that log enrichment because I want to enhance my data with some more information. And in that log enrichment, there is also another handy wizard called the Activity Info Wizard. And the Activity Info Wizard now allows me to go through and label certain things about my activities, including estimated cost, estimated time. So I can go through for each activity and enhance it with estimated cost and time. How much time am I spending on each activity? How much does it cost me if it's done by a manager? This is a quick way to get a baseline of how much a process costs or how much each case costs within your organization to process from start to finish. It's what we call activity-based costing. So rather than just saying we believe we spend about 30 minutes on each case, so we think this case costs us $20 to process an invoice, open a new customer account, whatever it might be, we can now do proper costing, which will essentially look at every single activity that has to happen in a case. So it takes into account loops, reworks, redone cases, any corrections, any edits, and you get a true holistic perspective of how much cost really goes into processing something within your environment. So I'm going to save that, and now I have an enhanced data set with cost. But in this particular case, I also want to not only be able to leverage the cost, I want to be able to summarize all the values on a case-by-case basis. So I'm going to enhance my data set with one more enrichment as well. And instead of putting it in my existing blocks, just for simplicity's sake, and so I remember what I did, I'm going to create a new notebook, and it's an enrichment notebook, and we're going to call it cost. So this is where I will put any new enrichments that I want to calculate based on cost. And since we are summarizing this, I want to add a new enrichment, and we're going to call it summarize. So I want to summarize values for this particular attribute. I'm going to give it a new name, which we'll call case cost, and we want to calculate the estimated cost and summarize the values within a case. So it's going to take all of those activities and give us a case cost attribute. Now I will once again calculate my enrichments so that we now take all of those enhancements that we've done and update our enriched data set with all of this new information, execute that pipeline, and once that's done, we will then be able to go in and look at our actual case cost. So it's completed. Once again, we're going to use that shortcut that says current. We're going to go back to our process for case cost, and we're going to leverage it here. Now, in this particular scenario, I may want to take some shortcuts. And what I mean by shortcuts is maybe I've already done average case cost processing before in a previous setup. I could cut and paste that in and cut and paste the entire analysis from one setup to another. So what I'm going to do is pull up an old setup in this scenario, and I'm just going to copy a previous setup and I'm going to paste it right into here. Now, there are a couple things that happen. You can see quickly that it's copied over a new setup called claim processing. So in this case, I wanted my average onboarding cost. So I'm just going to take this title, and since I've cut and pasted a configured one, I don't really need this anymore, so I'll delete it right from mindzie Studio. And this one you can see is called claim processing cost. So this is come from a insurance setup that was already done, and we're just going to rename that now to custom onboarding. You can see that it has a bunch of different metrics that are already set up, but the titles are from my previous setup. So I'm going to go ahead and just update these titles to the correct one that I want. so that once we fix our notebook, we have everything we need. So all of these things, this entire notebook comes fully populated. So it has all the dashboard metrics that you can see here. They're not quite populated yet, and the reason for that is they are being driven by the notebook, right? So the notebook goes through and shows me all of the different blocks that have been added. You can see this one is a lot more complete than the one we did before. So what we're going to do, especially for cut and pasting from previous notebooks where I've customized a bunch of things, I need to then go back and update all of these to match what I'm trying to accomplish in this new setup. So we are going to start by updating this title because it's not claim processing. We're talking about onboarding. Then you can see that in this particular case, we're selecting activities where reopen and a few other things happen. For this scenario, we're not concerned with that, so we are going to remove that filter. And the next filter you see for the previous example was it was looking at things that started in 2004. Not relevant to this scenario, so we're going to click those three dots and we're going to remove that filter as well. So now we can see cost per activity. As you can see here, the processing cost. In this case, it says by rework, but since we're not filtering by rework, we're just going to call it processing cost in general, and it's using a breakdown calculator that shows me the average cost based on different activity steps. So that's helpful. I'm going to keep that in. If I scroll down, the next one is a root cause analysis. So we are going to edit this root cause analysis because we want to make some changes to it. So you can see previously it was looking at root cause for selected cases in which activity settlement happened more than once. That's not relevant to what we're doing, so we're going to make some changes. So I'm going to edit this, and we're going to, in this case, we don't want to use that one at all, so maybe we're just going to delete this one, and we're going to add a different type of filter. And we're going to choose cases with attribute, and we want to look at, for cost, average, we're going to use that average cost, and we're going to look at, let's just select maybe cases with conformance issues. So we want to look at root cause of cost related to conformance issues. So I'm going to update my outcome as well. And in this case, I'm going to turn on auto. So it automatically chooses the fields that it's going to run root cause analysis on, uses Mindzie's AI engine now to go through and look at conformance issues. In this case, you can see that my root cause analysis is blank, and that's really because it's found no specific patterns in this data relevant to conformance issues for root cause analysis. So you can make edits, we can make changes in there as well if we wish. You can see that almost all of them have conformance issues, so probably not a great breakdown, but you can use the root cause analysis and update accordingly. It will all update as your data refreshes, and now that I've fixed that notebook, I now have a full average onboarding per customer that is a cost metric, shows me breakdown for the different types of activities that we're doing and how much they cost. And I'm going to take this metric now from my local analysis, and I'm going to publish it back over to my dashboard. As you configure Mindzie Studio, you continue this process, adding more analysis, diving into the data, and leveraging those metrics and publishing them out as dashboards. Now, each one of these analysis can be used to drive metrics and KPIs on a dashboard. It can also be used simply as a playground for you to dig in and look at what's happening within your process. Experiment with Mindzie Studio and try different things. And depending on what you're trying to do, you create these metrics. They may stay contained in your analysis, and as we've seen, they may get published out to your dashboard. If I flip back over the dashboard now to see how my setup is coming along, we're going to click on our process overview dashboard, and you're going to see that the couple of metrics that I've added in here are now on display. So I'm going to edit this layout, and we're going to do a little bit of cleanup. So I might want to format this dashboard a little bit. I'm going to put my metrics side by side, and I want them to fill out the entire screen. So we'll do it like this, so that we have a nice setup for how this is going to look. What I may also want to do is look at, well, now how do I make this a little bit more visually appealing for my clients? So I'm also going to add a note panel here. We're going to use our markdown language. In this case, I'm going to disable the title, and I'm going to change the background to be dark. And I'm going to change the text to be light, in this case white. By clicking on those things, I can now add that to my dashboard, and what I'm going to do is maximize it across the screen. I want to put it above my metrics. So you can put context in here, you can add different information for the user about it, how to use the dashboard, and all kinds of different things. So if I wanted to get even more specific for a user, I may want to either create another note panel, or I might want to edit this note panel and add information to a user. Right? Hover over any of the KPIs to see the link icon, then click the icon to drill into that KPI. So now I can leave instructions for my user on how to use the dashboard as well. So once they come in here, they can see that, hey, look, I'm looking at average onboarding. Maybe I want some more information. If I hover over it, I can click the link icon, and it will pop up the dashboard that is driving that with all of the relevant information. And again, because the system is configurable, I've decided that I want this one to land on this internal dashboard that's driving the analysis. But you can also have it land on the process map. You can have it land on mindzie's variant DNA to understand the different steps that are happening, data overview, or even simply a list of the different cases, if that's what you need and what's most relevant to your user. Now we continue down the setup process, and as we go through, we add the rest of our metrics, KPIs. Keep in mind that Mindzie Studio is highly configurable. So we can configure these single metrics, we can have trend metrics, we can populate it with root cause analysis, with Case Explorer, with different charts and KPIs, all driving pure process intelligence and giving your users the information that they need to be able to drive real return on investment and continuous improvement.